Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Oklahoma Rural Schools Coalition Election Forum for State Superintendent of Public Instruction in Oklahoma. Today is actually the International Day of Rural Women, in case you didn't know, so I wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude to all the rural women in Oklahoma that are out there working hard to better their families and communities. Thank you so much for all that you do. My name is Erica Wright, and I am the founder of the Oklahoma Rural Schools Coalition, and I will be serving today as moderator. The Oklahoma Rural Schools Coalition is a true grassroots, all-volunteer, parent-led organization that focuses on efforts to support rural Oklahoma classrooms and empower our rural voters to change the course of public education politics in our state. We are nonpartisan and welcome members from all political parties. And in this election cycle, we are simply focused on which candidates are best for public schools, regardless of political party. You can join in our conversations about all things rural schools by coming and joining our public Facebook group or hopping on over to Twitter and following us there. We also have our November final election voter guide. It is a nonpartisan resource outlining every single state-level race that is on your ballot in November and stacking up how those candidates compare to one another on issues regarding public education. You can access that by visiting our website at okruralschools.org. So first, I just want to start by thanking our partners at Stroud Public High Schools for agreeing to host this important event today. This new and beautiful, amazing facility is one of the premier performing arts venues in the entire state, not just for public schools, but all the venues. So it's definitely something that the community of Stroud and their administration and faculty and staff can be proud of for generations to come. So thank you, Superintendent Van Tile, for allowing us and hosting us here today. In case you were not aware, we have had some last-minute changes to the setup of today's event. Secretary Ryan Walters recently contacted us last Friday of a last-minute scheduling conflict, and he will not be in attendance today. We did offer to reschedule the dates to another day that would work for his schedule or pivot to an online format. We put those offers out with some deadlines. As you can imagine, we kind of needed to get all of this stuff set up. And unfortunately, we received no further response from Secretary Walters or his team to either of our offers to reschedule or to go online. And so we decided to move ahead and continue on with this important event as planned. So that's kind of the background on that. While we are disappointed in his decision to not prioritize this opportunity to speak with rural voters in a live debate format, we are still very excited to bring to you this important discussion with candidate Gina Nelson to our public school supporters across the state. One note, without both candidates' participation in the debate format, our friends at News 9 were unable to continue participating in the event. That's why you have me up here instead of the lovely Augusta McDonald. But, however, with the assistance of Superintendent Van Tile, we were able to secure an amazing film crew up here on the fly who were willing to give up a little bit of their Saturday to come help us pull this off. So, thank you guys. Thank you so much. So, on that note, we are taping this. It will be uploaded to our website. Again, that's okruralschools.org later today for online viewing. We will post that link into our social media channels as soon as that's available, and we encourage everybody here in the audience today and everybody online watching at home later to actively and widely share that link with all of your networks of public education supporters across Oklahoma. So here's how today's event will flow. I will be moderating the discussion, like I said earlier, and I will be joined by some expert panelists that we have down here in front to help with question presentation and follow-up. So we're going to kind of round robin the question, and then when Ms. Nelson is done addressing it, then we may have some follow-up questions as well from all of us. All of the questions that we're asking today were submitted to us by voters around the state of Oklahoma during a month-long open submission period. And those of you who submitted questions, thank you. You guys rocked it. We had over 300 questions submitted for this event today. So we took those questions, we categorized them as you know, they matched up, and then we ranked them by order of popularity and kind of went from there. So that's how that process was. So these are not questions that I wrote, you know, on my back patio. These are questions that you, Oklahoma voters, had for those seeking to lead our public schools. So, Ms. Nelson will have roughly 2 minutes to answer each question. Because we have so many, we're going to kind of keep a fast pace. Ms. Nelson will have you will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and then we will open it up to the panelists and myself to allow any follow-up questions if needed. If there's follow-up questions, we'd like to keep those answers around 30 seconds if possible. We have Kristen Caruso, parent from Noble, down here in the front. She's going to hold up this shiny, sparkly red placard to notify you that you've got about 10 seconds left to wrap things up. And then when you're out of time, she will ring her teacher bell, because we need a teacher bell instead of a buzzer, right? She'll ring the teacher bell to let you know that time is up, and then you can wrap it up. So we do ask, I don't anticipate there be any problems, but we do ask that our audience to please be respectful of the discussion, as we have a lot of questions to cover. You can applause. You know, if you hear something you like, go for it, but let's just, you know, quick and to the point. If there is any repeated negative disruptions, we will not tolerate that. Like I said, we don't expect any poor audience conduct, but we do have security on site to help us out if there are any issues that arise. So now, before we kick it off with Ms. Nelson, I would like to introduce and welcome our team of expert panelists that will be helping us out with today's forum. So first, traveling all the way from El Reno, Oklahoma, here in the middle, is Mr. Craig McVeigh. Craig has been married to Darla for 39 years. He's the father of 2 combat-decorated sons, Josh, a pilot in the U.S. Air Force, and Kit, a Tulsa attorney. He is a proud father-in-law of Bethany, who is a public school teacher, and Andy, a registered nurse. Craig is also a proud grandfather to 6 beautiful granddaughters who attend public schools as well. He is a recently retired, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Recently retired school superintendent from El Reno Public Schools, and during his career has also served in multiple roles as principal, counselor, coach, bus driver, custodian, and child nutrition worker, because that's what our superintendents do. They wear all the hats. Craig is a lifetime advocate for public school kids, teachers, and families, and we could not be more thrilled to have Mr. Craig McVeigh joining our team of panelists today. So, Craig, thank you for coming. Next up, we are so excited to have Superintendent of Stroud Public Schools, our host, on our panel today. So, please meet Mr. Joe Van Tile. And Mr. Van Tile, I cannot express how grateful we are with all the flexibility. When we called him about having this, he said, sure, and who wouldn't when you have a facility like this, right? It's amazing. So we're really grateful and lucky to be able to be here with you. So Mr. Van Tile's professional experience dates back to August of 1979. He has served since then in Jenks Public Schools, Chelsea Public Schools, and the Stroud Public Schools as a teacher and coach. He has been a member of the Stroud administration as high school principal since August of 2002 and has been superintendent since January of 2012. Joe also has life experience in the industries of agriculture and insurance. He is married with 4 adult children and 4, soon to be 5, wonderful grandchildren. So again, thank you to Joe Van Tile for agreeing to host this event and to serve on our panel today. And last, but certainly not least, we have Mr. Tommy Turner, superintendent from Batiste Public Schools in the southeast corner of the state. And I just want to tell you how committed he was to being here today. Unfortunately, down in that part of the state, if you haven't heard, they're fighting some wildfires, which got very close to his home last night. So, of course, we're thrilled to see him here, but we will keep your community and your region down there in Southeast Oklahoma in our prayers, and of course, obviously, your home as well, too, and we're glad you guys made it through that scary evening last night. So Tommy has been a superintendent for 7 years and taught high school science, business, and math for 7 years prior to that. He is proud to have worked on legislation and programs in the states of Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, including the first CHIPS program, $46 million for school security in New Mexico, and fights against consolidation, vouchers, defunding, and more. He continues to fight for support staff raises as well as teacher raises, evaluation system reform, testing systems reform, addition of service centers, districts of innovation, and project-based learning. Notable achievements include building a 2,000-head feedlot operation at only 20 years old, becoming a Fortune 100 executive in New York City by 27, but most importantly, the role of being a father. After leaving New York, he sought to spend more time in the latter role and to pursue his passion for teaching. So, Tommy, thank you so much for being here with us, and once again, our prayers are out to your community.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so this brings us to, let's get started. The most important introduction of the day is that of our attending candidate who is seeking the office of State Superintendent of Public Instruction for the state of Oklahoma, Miss Gina Nelson. Ms. Nelson, on behalf of public school supporters around the state, I want to thank you personally for making time in your hectic schedule. We know that you have been traveling all over the state like a crazy woman, like all corners of the state. So I just want to personally thank you for making time in your hectic schedule to prioritize this very important conversation today. It really means a lot to the people of Oklahoma, so thank you. We appreciate your commitment to participating and your commitment to sharing your views on issues important to voters all over the state, whether they're rural, suburban, or urban. So Gina, why don't you just take about a minute, let's say a minute, 2 minutes, to introduce yourself to our audience and share your background and why you're running for Oklahoma State next Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for being here today. Yes, my name is Gina Nelson. I have been an educator for 17 years. I have also been named one of the top 45 educators in the nation with the Award for Teaching Excellence, and I was the 2020 Oklahoma Teacher of the Year. Thank you. In addition to my education career, I have also spent a lot of time on committees that deal with mental health, trauma-informed practices, food insecurity, career readiness programs, and much, much more, both at the state and the national level. And in my other life experiences, as you were talking about our esteemed colleague here, I've also worked in the corporate world. I've run my own small business, and I've also been a realtor. My passion is for public education because I believe that public education saves lives. I know this because that's what happened to me. It was because of a great educator in southeastern Oklahoma that set me on the pathway to success that has me standing here before you. I believe that public education should be defended, not defunded, and I believe that all of us working together can move it in a more forward direction. And so I thank you all for having me here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Okay, so let's get started. Again, we've got some really great heavy-hitting questions, so we're really excited to hear what you have to say. We're going to jump right on in to the category of federal funding. At an August campaign event in Shawnee, your opponent stated on camera, quote, "I am phasing away us using through the department federal dollars. This decision would severely impact crucial services for Oklahoma's public school children, such as special education, free reduced lunches, VOAG programs, which of course are very important in rural communities, Title I reading and math and Indian education, to name a few, and there's many more than that, but those are the big ones. The very real threat of losing much needed education dollars for our children is extremely concerning for rural parents and voters. Because rural areas have a higher rate of poverty, our schools in rural areas have a higher dependence on both state and federal dollars. So today we have two questions about the removal of federal funding that's been proposed by your opponent. So we're going to start with Mr. McVeigh. He's going to go ahead and ask question number 1.
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. Before I get to the question, I want to say a couple of things. First
Sure.
of all, thank you to the Rural Oklahoma Schools Coalition for inviting me around 2 months ago to participate in this panel. We all have scheduling conflicts. I should have been in Fort Worth watching the Oklahoma State Cowboys play this afternoon,
Go Pokes.
but I chose to come to Stroud for one reason: the future of our kids. It's more important to me than a football game in Fort Worth. I also would like to thank you.
Thank
I
you.
also would like to thank Superintendent Joe Van Tol here. What an incredible facility Stroud offers to the entire state of Oklahoma, not just in presence, but in thought. I looked at the composite picture from the class of 22. If there is a more inclusive school district that opens its doors to its community than Stroud, I'll be surprised and shocked to see that. And so I want to thank you, Joe, for hosting today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And last, I'd like to thank Gina for coming. Showing up is part of the job. We've all been there. We understand that. We know you're going to show up for Oklahoma kids. And I'll end that with question number 1. Question number 1, this question was submitted by an anonymous retired teacher and administrator from Yukon. In your opinion, does your opponent's proposed plan to remove federal funding from Oklahoma's public schools help or hurt Oklahoma's children, particularly economically disadvantaged children in rural areas of our state?
Thank you so much for your question. It absolutely devastates the children of Oklahoma. We have over 700,000 public school children, and over 300,000 of them live below the poverty line. So those federal funds are helping our students, our most vulnerable students in Oklahoma. And some of the programs that you listed, Erica, that would be affected: free and reduced lunch. Well, I take that very personally because I was a child who grew up on free and reduced lunch down in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. I don't know what I would have done if I had not had those services. And as a teacher working with our special education children and our teachers that are serving them and our paraprofessionals, it's absolutely important that we accept these funds. If you guys have seen lately the amount of money that would come out of every single county and how it would affect all of our schools, it would absolutely devastate not just rural Oklahoma, but the entire state of Oklahoma, with, of course, the most money coming out of our rural areas. Where I'm from originally, in McCurtain County, over $1 million would be taken out of our public school systems. And we just can't have that. And so we need to make sure that we have people who understand what federal funds do and who they serve. Not just one type of kid, one type of group, but it serves all of our children, which serves all of our communities. Thank you.
Panelists, do any of you have any follow-up to that answer? I have a couple, but I'm going to give you the opportunity first. Okay. So can you share with the audience just how, so if federal funds are removed from our public schools in Oklahoma, how much money is that overall? I know you just said $1 million in McCurtain County, but how much money are we looking at if you combine all of those federal programs?
Oh my goodness, we are talking millions, almost billions of dollars. Even looking at that, and then if you coupled it with vouchers, we happen to pass that, we're absolutely devastating a program. And another thing that we don't talk a lot about is, how are we going to replace that money? Where is that money going to come from? We talk about taking it away, but we can't take it away and just make it magically go away, because we, by law, are told that we have to provide a fair and appropriate public education for the students of Oklahoma. And so we need to really talk about where that money is going to come from. Is that going to come from the taxpayers, or what is the plan? If they're going to take away, we can't just take it away without supplementing it as well.
Thank you. I do have another follow-up question on that. Because we've had a lot of people that did submit questions surrounding that. We didn't have it officially here, but I do want to follow up because we have a lot of special needs parents that have been concerned about that. If federal funding were to be phased out, What would you say to parents who are concerned that their special needs children would still adequately be serviced and still receive their fair access to public education, their FAPE, as detailed in the IDEA of 2004? How would that work if that was gone? Because I think those parents need to understand what could be on the table.
Well, sure, and I'm not a Pollyanna, so I'm just going to be real honest with everyone. Because right now, we are facing a lot of issues with not having enough educators in special education. And if we take away those funds, we are going to be pulling educators out of the school. We don't have educators there. We're not going to have someone who is going to help our students, special education or otherwise. And so we have to look at this as a domino effect. It is not just, oh, well, that particular group doesn't get funding. No, we're talking about educators leaving in droves. We have been talking about the Great Resignation all last year, where we saw a huge amount of teachers leave. That's just the first wave. And we know that they're watching very carefully right now this election, this particular election, to see what happens. And so I would say to all of them, we have to vote. And we have to make sure that our voices are heard. There's more at stake than just making sure that, programs are funded. We've got to make sure that we have the educators inside of our school districts that service these children, that keep our communities together. And that is the domino that no one wants to talk about. It is a domino effect, and it starts with educators. And so I would say to them right now, it is time to get involved, because I don't even want to think about what is going to happen with our special education students if we don't have our educators there that are going to provide those much needed services. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Joe, I've already screwed this up because that was your question, the follow-up that it, listen, I'm not a professional at this. That's why we were going to have Augusta McDonald here, so my apologies. I already just took your question straight out
Well, I
of the
do
gate.
have one follow-up.
Okay, go for it.
So some of the concern with federal funding is tied to the requirements that are attached to federal funding. Do you have concerns about the requirements that are attached to federal funding in the state of Oklahoma?
I think that we have all adjusted over the years to many of these requirements, and until we have more of a say at the federal level, obviously we have to follow the rules. There are laws that we have to follow. And one of the things that when we talk about the educated voter and making sure they understand what they're voting for and who they're voting for, it has, once again, that domino effect. I know right now that we do have a lot of funds that are tied into different programs that we have to follow. We just have to use a little bit more common sense on how we approach those subjects and get that out to the public to make them understand the laws and rules and regulations that we all have to follow when it comes to federal funds.
So one other follow-up to that would be, would you see your role as assisting schools in meeting compliance or supervision of that compliance to mandate its edicts?
So I think that the role of the superintendent, obviously, we have to share that information. We have to communicate at the federal level as well to talk about what the real issues are and try and influence policy. But also, I trust our districts. I trust our superintendents to make sure that they are doing everything in their power to comply and to make sure that we get the funds that we need and follow the rules that we have because we're all connected. I would love to say that the superintendent can, be all and do all, but that we all know in this room, it's just not possible. And so having the faith in the superintendents of the state, who work very hard, and I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting here looking at 3 superintendents, but I see it and I know it. And having those conversations with you directly, having conversations, not having someone dictate to you, but seeing how we can work together to make sure that we provide the best education with everything that we've been given to the people of Oklahoma.
Erica, if I may,
Go ahead.
it's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but it's on this topic. 2 of the biggest issues with federal dollars have to do with the A/F report card and state testing. How could you see addressing some of those issues in your administration?
Absolutely. How many seconds do I have for this one?
30.
I know this is
I know,
about
speed
a
round.
30
three-day-
seconds?
I know, speed round.
I realize this is
Yes,
about
we're
a 3-day
absolutely,
conversation.
yes, we are absolutely addressing the issues with state testing. They will be revamped to make more common sense, as we have seen in other states. Not only will they align more with our standards, we will have more control over what kind of things go into that particular test. It will be greater for our districts. It'll be easier for our families to understand the information, and our teachers will be given input and have direct data on how we can correct all of those issues. And the same will go for the A through F report card. 30 seconds.
Nice.
Are you in favor of keeping an A to F letter grade or simply providing the information to the parents without putting a letter grade on it?
I think that what we need to do is make sure that an A through F report card is a lot more equitable, and making sure that we have information that not only they understand, but also all of the stakeholders across our state understands. And so we sometimes need to over-communicate, because I don't think that a lot of people understand what's on the A through F or how it breaks down. And I think that that is something that at the State Department level we need to do. We need to communicate more to the stakeholders of our state.
Okay.
Well, and in response to that, I know that there are doctoral students that do their dissertations on how to calculate A to F report cards. Literally, it's that complicated.
Yes, absolutely. And I will say that I'm lucky enough to have met a lot of great people across the state who have a lot of input on that A through F report card, and they could help us revamp it and get that communication out to people as well. I've got great faith in the people of Oklahoma.
Okay, thank you. That was a great discussion on federal funds. We could be here all day talking about that and many of these topics, but we're going to move on to our next category, which is category of private school voucher programs. So public schools are the lifeblood of our communities, especially in rural Oklahoma. So Governor Stitt has heavily promoted a private school voucher program idea that would remove state aid dollars from public school budgets to pay for private school tuitions. So here's the deal. Out of 77 counties in the state of Oklahoma, 74 of those counties have less than 2 private schools in the entire county, with the majority of those 74 counties having 0. Now, coupled with driving distance that students have in rural areas and the enrollment capacity limits when you only have 1 or 2 in the entire county, the vast majority of Oklahoma's rural students wouldn't even be able to participate in a private school voucher program. Yet this program, this type of program, would still be funded with the dollars originally appropriated for their public school instruction, okay? It can get complicated, but that's in it in a nutshell. We're talking about taking money that's already been in public schools and redistributing that to give some of that money that was previously in private schools away to kids going to in public schools going to private schools. So, we have 2 questions submitted regarding private school voucher plans. Tom, it's your turn.
This question is combined from 2 submissions by Jamie, a teacher from Duncan, and Mindy, the superintendent of Avant Public Schools. If a voucher plan were to be passed by the legislature, what would be the potential outcome of funding loss from the state aid formula, particularly in lower income communities that have minimal ad valorem revenue and rely heavily on state funds?
Okay, thank you for your questions. So first, I just want to go ahead and say that I am against the voucher program. I believe our public dollars need to stay in our public schools. So I just want to start that out. Right now, if we had a voucher system, and I'm obviously thinking of my hometown in Broken Bow, and I'm thinking about the K-8 program at Luke Fada Public Schools that I attended, it would absolutely devastate our community. I don't know where, honestly. They would have to raise taxes, and I don't know how that would work. And I know, to me, this is common sense, that we want to take care of all of our public schools. It's common sense, and I know it's not a flower that grows in everybody's garden, but we got to start planting some seeds right now to make people understand that if we institute these voucher programs, we are going to close down communities. You close down a community, you're going to close down small business. People are going to move away, and we need to make sure that we are taking care of our rural areas. I've driven all over this state, and I've seen so much farmland, and I think about the people that are working these farms and how that's going to be affected and how that's going to impact our economy. And so for me, I don't even I don't even want to fathom, honestly, what it would look like to institute these kind of programs, because it's going to hurt our people. And maybe that's not the best political answer I can give you, but I can tell you I don't want to see people hurt. I see enough people hurting in our state right now. And we need to do what's right for people. That means investing in our schools, which is an investment in our kids, our investment in our communities, investing in our families. And so, sir, I hope that that's an adequate answer for you, but that's how I feel about it.
Any follow-up on that? I know we have one more voucher question from Craig. We good? Okay. By the way, I didn't tell you, you do have a bottle of water down to your right if you
thank you.
need it. Okay, Craig, let's move on to question number 4. This is also about vouchers.
This question was submitted by an anonymous parent and teacher in rural Oklahoma. In your opinion, if taxpayer money is provided to a private school, to what degree should that school have to follow state education mandates, and what level of transparency to taxpayers should private schools be required to provide?
They should follow all of it. If they are receiving public dollars, then they should be held to the same standards that our public schools are held to every single day. And, and that's one of the things that last year when this voucher bill came up, is that there were many, private schools and even homeschooling families that said they were not for this because of this very reason. And so for me, I personally believe that you should be held to the same standards.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any follow-up?
Yes, so would it be the belief, and certainly I'm asking you to respond in terms of others' beliefs, but that private schools believe the restrictions and requirements on public schools are not beneficial?
I'm sorry, say that again.
I'm just saying, do you believe that it is the belief of private schools that the restrictions and requirements on public schools are not beneficial?
I think that we all should have accountability. And I think that obviously that in public schools we're held under quite a bit of, a very big magnifying glass. And I think that accountability is very important. And I want to see that in our public schools. But I also think that we are held to such a standard where sometimes it's a gotcha game. And so I think I'm just going to stay with yes. I think accountability is important, but we got to have some common sense about it too.
Okay, let's move on to the hottest topic of questions we received. We got a lot of questions about teacher retention, recruitment, and pay. So this first one that Joe's going to ask here in a second is a combo question from many people that submitted questions about this. So Oklahoma State School Board Association's annual survey this year indicates that Oklahoma is experiencing a record number of teaching vacancies this school year. Many teachers have told us that they plan to leave the profession pending November's elections. And so we have 2 questions for you today surrounding teacher retention, recruitment, and teacher pay. So Joe, take the mic.
This question is combined from submissions by several voters: Adam, a parent from Norman; Melissa, a reading specialist from Bixby; Alicia, a parent and teacher spouse from Veneta; Summer, a parent from Pryor; Caitlin, a teacher and department chair from Enid; Cassie from Noble; and Christy, a parent and community member from Cache. If elected as Oklahoma's next state superintendent of public instruction, what is your specific plan to stop the mass exodus of teachers and encourage the new generation of teachers to stay in Oklahoma, specifically in harder to recruit rural areas?
All right, thank you for that question. I have 2 minutes and I'm going to talk really, really fast. So first of all, we need to have a state superintendent who's going to elevate and celebrate the profession and not tear it down and constantly terrorize the educators of this state. I've only got 2 minutes, folks. Okay, so the next thing is that we have to make sure that we address teacher pay with our legislature. That we have got to make sure that we have a competitive rate of pay to keep our teachers in our schools. The next thing is that we've got to tone down the rhetoric. Because right now, educators across Oklahoma have been called everything under the sun but professional, and that has to stop. They need to feel that they are being respected instead of constantly being attacked or tried in the court of Twitter and Facebook law. We also need to make sure that we have professional development, especially for our 1st through 5 years. And I will tell you, as the former state teacher of the year, following up with these teachers that I met when they were interns, keep asking them, what is it that you need? What do you wish you knew now that you wish you had known then? And they say, we need more trauma-informed practices, because we did not realize how many children that we would be meeting on a day-to-day basis, that we need to know how to work with them. The next thing we obviously have to do is, I know that it's a pipe dream, everyone talks about it being a pipe dream, but we have to address the classroom size, especially with all of the issues that we have dealing with trauma and kids in our classrooms. We also need to then, at the State Department, become more boots on the ground. We need to be there and offering help to all of you, and including mental health help. We also need to then streamline our website where we have all the standards listed, where you can actually click on it and then see lesson plans that have been submitted from teachers all over the state. That's going to help our 1 through 5. And we also need to have a school culture survey that goes out every January. And I'll talk more about that soon, it looks like. Thank you for your time. I got the red flag.
Any follow-up? Okay, before we move on to the next one, just because she has so much to fit into that 2 minutes, I know when you hear an answer that you get excited about, you just, you want to cheer, clap. Let's at least hold our applause until after she's finished with the answer, so that she can get as many words shoved in there as possible. Okay, Tom, with question number 6.
This question was submitted by Ashley, a teacher from Catoosa. In order to incentivize teachers into the profession, will you push to repeal the rule of 90 back to the rule of 80? Now, this is somewhat of a loaded question because you have 2 major issues that you have to deal with for this. One is most teachers do not receive steps to get to those added years of service because they max out. The other is part of the reason why pensions are moving to the rule of 90 or have moved to the rule of 90 nationwide is the inability of the pension trusts to be able to meet the demands of people retiring at the rule of 80 and then living longer. How would you address this?
We're going to have to all work together on this, and I'm talking about superintendents, legislators, every organization that we have that deals with public education, higher education, career tech. We need to come up, because this is not working. It's not working. It's not an equitable way of taking care of our people who have served for so many years in public education. And they need to have everything, from a cost of living adjustment to making sure that they're going to be okay when it comes to their retirement. I know so many people that, they're hanging on for such a long time, and then of course the salaries are capped for the people who do have steps. We need to have some common sense approaches of making sure that our educators are taken care of, not just while they're in the classroom, but beyond. They have given up so much of their life and for the most important thing, which is public service of our children. And they deserve to be taken care of. They deserve to have what they need to be successful and taken care of after they've retired. Thank you. Yes.
Follow up, Joe?
Yes. The joy of teaching many times is related to those spark moments that you get in the classroom that make everybody in the room feel good, from students to teachers to parents and beyond. With that, we have many standards attached to education growing since the 1980s. Do you see instruction as a science or as an art?
Oh, it's both. There is an art to it. And when we talk about the arts, we talk about, the empathy and the magic that happens to it. But then the science part of it is knowing what strategies and what pedagogy works with it. So for me, it is a science and an art. When I step in front of my students, they get to see almost the magic of the lesson coming to life. But we know as educators how much work went into that, how much science, how much, just great lesson planning went into all of that. But then there is an art of magic and empathy that happens with all of our students, and when the click happens within those classrooms. So I would say it's an art and a science.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to local control. Local control is very important very important to rural communities and their voters. We've heard a lot of politicians using this term of school choice and statements that parents should be in the driver's seat of their children's education. However, recent legislative policy changes in the last few years and actions by the State Board of Education would suggest that these concepts of choice and parental input seem to not apply to school boards and parents in rural Oklahoma. We have 2 questions for you surrounding local control. Craig, question number 7.
Despite overwhelming parent and community, this question was submitted by Ashley, a teacher from Catoosa. Despite overwhelming parent and community support of flexible and innovative calendars, the Oklahoma legislature, elected officials, have chosen to ignore rural voices on the issues of 4-day school calendars. This past May, current members of the State Board of Education voted to take it a step further by denying calendar waivers to schools that achieve the benchmarks set forth, which were put in place to allow high-performing rural schools the opportunity to continue with their innovative calendars. Will you commit to helping restore the option for local districts to return to a locally controlled calendar? Why or why not?
I will, because you have to think about, well, what put us in this position to begin with? Obviously, we are having issues with funding. Because I know everybody would love to have a 5-day week and everyone has fully funded schools, but the issue is that we got into this position because we've got to make sure we can keep the lights on, we've got to make sure we can keep teachers in our schools in our rural areas, and so yes, I will absolutely support it. They've laid out a set of criteria for all of the rural schools to meet, and if you've met those, and if we're not getting the funding we need, then we need to make sure that we're using common sense, once again, to help our schools, help our communities. And if that's what your community is wanting as well, and the community's behind it, I don't see what the issue is. We just need to make sure that we're all on the same page, that the kids are receiving a great education, and that our families are supportive. I'm really open to having those conversations.
One follow-up,
Okay,
Ms.
go
Wright,
ahead.
Ms. Nelson.
Yes.
Education in Boise City might not necessarily be the same education necessary in Broken Bow. So would you say that you would trust state leaders or local school boards to make those kind of decisions?
I think that, we have to have a conversation with our state school, or our local school boards, because they know their community, they know what the needs. Education isn't a blanket that we can throw over the state and say, yep, this works for everyone. We need to have conversations and say, what are the needs that you have here in Broken Bow? What are the needs that we have in Oklahoma City Public Schools? And get these communities what they need. But I think we don't leave our legislators out of that conversation. In fact, I'd love to have the conversation with them as well, and which I will do, because it's important that we're all working together at the same goal, doing what's best for our communities and our schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, I have a follow-up if you don't mind.
Okay, follow up, Tom.
On this topic, the last time that teachers were granted pay raises in the state, not long after it, from our legislature, came Senate Bill 441, which mandated more days in the classroom, which took away some of this innovation. Now there's more talk about another $5,000 raise to teachers. Where would you stand, and would you be a voice on one side or the other as far as adding days to the calendar?
I think that we need to have a conversation about instructional time and quality instructional time. If we're just adding days to the calendar and not seeing results that we want to see, then we need to reevaluate that. Because really and truly, our educators, it takes us a long time to get lesson plans ready. We need more time built in. We also talk about instructional time versus time actually, being on contract as well. People need to understand is that we have to make sure that every hour that we're there, that we are engaging and that the kids are receiving 100% of our instructional time. But if we're just adding days to check off a box, we need to reevaluate that. We need to reevaluate that and have those conversations and with our legislators to say, we want you to understand more what's going on here. And I think that we need to do that. We need to do almost a PR, a public relations event to explain what's going on in our classrooms so they can understand those values that we have within our school systems.
On that same note, would you support more professional development days as opposed to simply just adding classroom days?
If professional development is true professional development that's actually helping and not adding one more thing to our educators and districts and superintendents, yes. But it needs to be thoughtful professional development that deals with the issues that are actually happening at your particular district. I don't want to see a lot of people hiring people from out of state, paying them an exorbitant amount of money, and teachers just sitting there when they could have some great professional development done within their school. Sometimes the best professional development I've ever had are from the teachers down the hallway from me. And I would love to give them that stage and that opportunity to work with people within the district so that we can learn from each other.
Okay, in the interest of time, Joe, I feel like this next question, number 8, that she addressed a lot of this in there. Would you be okay if we move on to question number 9?
I'd be fine with that.
Okay. Same thing with question number 9, Tom. She answered that earlier when we were talking about kind of teacher retention, so I'm going to knock that one out. So I am going to do, this section was on teacher morale and culture issues. We addressed the teacher morale when we were talking about retention, so I don't think we need to go back to that. However, I will say this. So Oklahoma has been a Republican-run government for decades. By default, a large majority of our teachers are also conservative, especially in our rural areas. Teachers from all political persuasions across the state have communicated to us that they feel discredited by a lot of the new policies in Oklahoma and that their morale is rapidly dropping due to the divisive political party rhetoric that's been injected into this particular race for state superintendent. So once again, we've addressed morale, but we do have 2 more questions that are specific, I believe, to critical race theory and House Bill 1775. So we're going to start, Craig, with question number 10, please.
This question was submitted by Melissa, an administrator from Blackwell. Please explain the difference between critical race theory and culturally responsive teaching. Elaborate on how important it is to have the latter and how teachers can specifically provide the latter without being targeted as indoctrinating students.
Well, thank you for the question. I've got 2 minutes again, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. First, let's address critical race theory. Critical race theory is a college elective that you could take in law school if you choose. It has never been taught in K through 12 in the state of Oklahoma. So I would like to say that again. We do not teach critical race theory. Now, as for why culturally responsive training is very important, and that goes into so many things, and let's just talk about history a little bit there. Because obviously 1775 is one of those bills that targets history. It's so important that we know our history, especially here in Oklahoma. This is a great state. I love my state. I love my country. But just like when I'm in front of my students and I talk about, what our school culture is going to be in the classroom, we talk about how we have to all work together because we are going to make mistakes. But those mistakes don't make us terrible people. That makes us want to be better. It makes us want to grow. And that's the important thing. We grow. We grow as a state. And that comes with learning things. So when we talk about the Trail of Tears, we have to learn about those things. We have to learn about what happened to the Murrah building. We have to learn about what happened in Tulsa. We have to learn about these things because it's important that we don't make those same mistakes. And that's not about making someone feel bad. When I was sitting in those classes learning about these things, I didn't hate myself, but I felt empathy. I felt empathy for the people that went through these things. And that's what's important, that we acknowledge, yes, these things happen. How can we not make these same mistakes? And how can we be more empathetic to our fellow Oklahomans so that we can truly rise to the Oklahoma standard that we talk about all the time? And that's what's important to understand, that in Oklahoma, we are blessed to have so many people that look so many different ways, that come from so many different backgrounds, and we all work together to make this state great. But we have to make sure that that comes from a place of empathy, and that we are not using a bill to weaponize against our educators or our school districts. And so that for me is very, very important that people understand. I hope I answered some of those. I'm sure I've got a few follow-ups, but...
Let me follow up
Yes, sir.
real quickly. In light of what has happened, this last few months.
Yes, sir.
Mustang and Tulsa penalized at the state level by the state school board. What would you do to prevent those kind of things from happening in the future?
Well, first of all, we need to have more due process and steps. We can't just be tried in the court of Twitter and Facebook law all the time. We are seeing districts that didn't have really a chance to even defend themselves, educators who haven't had a chance to defend themselves, and that's not right. And we're putting ourselves in a pretty dangerous situation. There have been a lot of threats and things made towards people, and that needs to calm down before somebody gets hurt. And so having those steps, with starting at the local level, going through the investigative process, going before your own school boards, then having it submitted, of course, then to the state school board with more due process and investigation. Yes, it might not be, I'm going to expand it real quick, if you don't mind. I'd like to take 20 seconds of his time. Thank you. But just, and I promise I'll wrap it up, but just making sure that people's voices are heard, so that it doesn't hurt, because when you're hurting a school district and you're lowering that accreditation, you're hurting kids. You are hurting a community. And we've got to make sure that if we're saying someone is breaking the law, let's make sure that we are doing all due diligence. Thank you, sir, and I apologize for going over.
Let me also follow up. Do you consider yourself woke, or anyone else woke?
Sir, I'm too broke to be woke. And just that, another thing of using catchphrases and things like this, let's just talk about it. It's fear. And I'm not in the business of fear, sir. I am in the presence of perpetual hope every single day in front of the students that I teach. And I want those students and the teachers that teach them and their families to know that I see the greatest hope and potential in them. And I don't want them to be scared of coming to school, because I know what it's like to be scared in real life as a kid who grew up in trauma, and I know that public schools was the place that I was safe at. And I'm going to make sure that we see that perpetual hope elevated and celebrated across this state.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Joe, would you agree question 11 was pretty much covered with all of that?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay, so thank you. And we will move on to school safety. Our next question relates to school safety and was submitted by Kristen, parent from Noble. Tom?
In 2022, there were at least 113 incidents of gunfire on school grounds, resulting in 41 deaths and 82 injuries nationally. Just in the past month, Oklahoma has seen school-related shootings with loss of lives and multiple threats around the state. What ideas do you propose for creating safer and more secure school environments?
Okay, thank you again, and I'll try to be very quick on this as well. But we know right now that we have internal problems in education and external problems. We need to focus on a big external problem of mental health, because right now our communities are suffering both outside of the school and inside of the school. And I know that some people like to throw that blanket and say, oh, well, that'll solve it all, but that's not it. Bringing also between mental health and then also having collaboration within our communities. Bringing our communities back to the public schools, having more volunteers, more eyes, more public events and things that where they know what's going on in our school, we know what's going on, because a lot of times we need wraparound supports in our public schools. We can't handle everything alone. And so, also, collaborating with our community leaders, collaborating with local law enforcement, making everyone understand that the issues that are going on in our school, our kids that are suffering, the people in our community are suffering. There's a lot of things that we're going to have to collaborate together. It should not just fall on the public schools, because there are so many local leaders that we need to be working with as well to ensure that our communities are safe, so that we can ensure that our schools are safe.
Any follow-up? We good? Okay. This is a longer question, but a very important question about career and technology education. So this question on career and tech ed was submitted by Ryan, a parent and teacher from way out in the Panhandle in Turpin, Oklahoma. So Craig.
Mrs. Jensen, currently Oklahoma Career Tech works with the public school system to offer free tuition and a high-quality education to prepare students for careers and to add skills needed for the workforce. But over 13% of the counties of the state have little to no access to a career tech campus. Online options are not feasible for the hands-on training available at these facilities. This includes all of the students in the Panhandle, as well as 3 other counties that border other states and are closer to options a short drive across the state line than many of the students taking long daily bus rides to go to career tech campuses. This is an equal access issue for more than a few students and a large land area of the state. Will you commit to funding local options for these students who deserve as much opportunity for free classes and training in career and vocational jobs as students all over the rest of the state?
Thank you so much. I need to say, first of all, I love our career tech programs. I have absolutely loved going around the state and touring so many of our programs, watching the kids work in those areas, seeing how amazing those hands-on experiences are. So we definitely need to get that collaboration going with not only elevating the presence and making our communities understand the value of career tech and the opportunities that they can receive there, but also getting them on our school campuses. You know, I've been in a lot of school districts where we actually have people who work for career tech, but they have their classrooms right there in our school buildings, making sure that our kids have access to STEM and STEAM projects, and they're learning about so many things that are happening inside our career tech. And it's great recruitment. Obviously, we're also helping, build up our individual career and academic plans, which we talk about the focus on career readiness. I am someone who believes in the power of hands-on learning. And I'm also telling you that when I'm talking to actual students across the state, they say, Ms. Nelson, we want to do more hands-on learning. We want more of that. So let's get that. If the kids need it and the kids want it and our families want it, let's make it happen.
A quick follow-up.
Sure.
So I think I've recently heard your opponent, and if he was here, I would ask him, that we should just have one state school board for higher ed, career tech, and common ed. Do you feel that way?
No, sir. Everyone has different needs and different levels of expertise. And you need to let the professionals who deal with those areas day in and day out have a say in how their particular areas are ran. And I think that's very important. And if we're just having one voice, one set of opinions, who are those opinions? Are those people going to be the people who are actually working day in and day out there, or are they going to be appointed, or just, friends of friends? We need to have the professionals who know what they're doing on those boards, and we need to have a variety of voices, but with the common goal of making sure that we promote and elevate and celebrate education in Oklahoma.
One quick follow-up. So I think what I heard you say was that you're not in favor of cronyism?
No, sir.
Thank you.
I am not. Thank you.
Okay, we are at 11 o'clock. I've looked through the additional questions, and there's really not any I feel like we can cut out that overlap. So if you can hang with us for about 15 more minutes, we'll get through this, and then we'll be done. So this is an issue and a category that's very personal and passionate to my life, and that is mental health. So suicide and mental health are big issues facing the youth and families of Oklahoma. This is no secret. I don't have this written in here, but I read something yesterday. I don't remember the exact statistic, but unfortunately that gap continues to widen between urban and rural, and our rural communities suffer from suicide at a higher rate than our urban and suburban communities. Of course, the COVID pandemic has exacerbated these challenges, and access to professional treatment help is difficult. It's very difficult for many rural families simply because they have lack of access to mental health providers. in rural Oklahoma. So this next question surrounds student mental health, and it was submitted by Jamie, a teacher from Duncan. Joe.
What are your plans to ensure issues impacting student mental health and social emotional needs are effectively addressed?
Well, thank you for that question. And this is something that's very personal to me, and obviously one of my top priorities as being the next superintendent is mental health. We already know that we have the highest ACE scores in the entire nation, adverse childhood experiences. And after the pandemic, we saw those behavior issues just absolutely rise, and we've seen suicide rates as well increase. And so what we have to do is obviously expand on the amount of counselors that we have at the state. I'm already actually working with mental health professionals around the state. We've targeted the 3 counties that have the highest ACE scores so that we can focus in those areas. I'm also making collaborations right now to expand telehealth into our rural areas, as well as there's an app company that has access to mental health professionals that are more tailored to educators or people who have specific needs, that we can get immediate help, at least someone to talk to. Because right now, as I'm going across and I'm talking to folks, they're saying, Gina, sometimes we have to wait 6 to 60 days to get help for our students. And that's not right. And we already know as educators, we can't teach them here if we can't reach them here first. If their needs are not being met, they can't learn. And we are seeing the domino effect of that. And so we have to make sure that this is a priority. I will make sure that this is a priority because I see it day in and day out, the toll that it's taking on our kids and our educators. Because the post-secondary trauma that educators are facing right now that no one really wants to talk about is real. And if we don't address it now, we are going to see more and more issues arise later on, and we have to stop it now. So this is something that's very important to me.
Does anybody have any follow-up, Tom?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that you do not support this movement to eliminate social emotional learning in our schools.
So I'd like to first say that because I know, this is one of those words that has been, weaponized again. I know that there are many people who are connecting social emotional learning with critical race theory, and it is not. When we talk about social emotional learning, we're talking about the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Being kind to each other, having empathy, learning to work together and collaborate, self-regulation so you're not acting out or hitting your friends or your teachers, and the list goes on and on. And I know that this will probably get spun in some way, but I'm telling you right now that if we don't teach people how to work together and collaborate and have control over their emotions, we're going to have a future workforce that is going to either be non-existent or it's going to be very combative, and we're going to see more and more issues on the news constantly. And so it's very important that when as earlier I was talking about empathy, we have to make sure we're taking care of each other's and ourselves. And our families need that too. They need those supports because some of them are struggling as well. And so when we talk about our communities, making sure that we have healthy communities, mental health, emotional health, and physical health, it's all tied together. And that's something that we need to focus on and continue doing.
Thank you.
Okay. Follow-up, Joe?
Yes. All that being said, all very important. We're heavily dependent on our schools in growing numbers of areas. An old adage speaks to moderation in all things. How does that apply to our public schools?
Moderation in all things?
Yes.
I think that means coming back down a little bit and using a little bit more common sense. When I think about moderation of the one more thing put on top of educators, that's the first thing that pops in my mind, because it seems like every year somebody comes in from out of state with a new flavor of the month program that's going to cure all our ills, and it doesn't. And we are sitting there and trying to add that one more thing on top of educating kids, on top of making sure they've got mental health addressed, and on top of making sure they've got enough food in their stomachs on top of this. And so for me, it's just making sure that, are we adding one more thing? Because we don't need that. And next thing is, I don't want to pay all that money for something that is not going to help but hinder the movement of moving forward in public education in Oklahoma. Another thing when we think about moderation is, I think about all of, the bills that come down that are focused on education, and I understand everybody wants to help, and I really do. Everyone wants to help, and they want to make changes. But if that is so much that our districts and our superintendents can't keep up with it, and our families are being hurt by it, we need to pull back. We need to get back to making sure that we're taking care of our schools. And that also means slowing down a little bit sometimes, especially after the pandemic, because we are just trying to get people back into believing in the power of public education again. And just adding one more thing on top is not helpful to us at all.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm adding about 6 to 10 new policies every month, so I really like that answer.
Short follow-up. Gina, when you become state superintendent, could you do me one favor? For 35 years, I have sat through blood-borne pathogens. Is there a way that you could say, if it's wet and it's not yours, don't touch it, and just leave that alone?
For those of you who are watching online and maybe you don't understand, is that every year before school starts, as we are setting up our classrooms, as we are welcoming our new educators, as we are getting our new classroom rosters and figuring out all of the different ways that we're here to educate, we sit and we have to watch at least 17 to 20-something videos and answer questions year after year about whether we know not to touch a puddle of blood on the floor. And so, I want to take a look at all of the things, especially at the beginning of the year, because the most difficult time for an educator is at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. And making sure that we give them adequate time to get ready for the great year that they're going to have with new students and new families and the new is very important. So while I can't make you a promise, let me see what I can do, because as someone who sits through them every single year, I empathize.
Thank you.
Okay, we only have a few more questions left. This one I'm still going to give you the 2 minutes on. The rest we'll pivot to 1 minute so that we can wrap this up. So this question is surrounding the topic of corruption and fraud. Our next question focuses on, like I said, corruption, fraud, and government transparency. And this question was submitted by Sabrina, a special needs parent and teacher from Stroud, Oklahoma. Take it away, Tom.
There's been a lot of talk during this campaign surrounding transparency and accountability. How would your administration have handled the $31 million of CARES Act money given via the GEARS funds? What would you have done differently than your opponent to ensure those dollars were handled appropriately?
Well, I believe that transparency is very, very important. I want to know where money is going. I want to make sure that it's helping all of our Oklahoma kids and our families that are in those districts. And I don't want to speak too much. I'd like to allow him to speak on what actually happened. But I will say is that we don't need more barbecue grills right now. What we needed, and I'm not trying to make a joke, what we needed during that time during COVID is we needed more wipes to make sure that we weren't, spreading germs everywhere. We needed more PPE. We needed more programs. We needed more HVAC ventilation systems. We needed more support. And we needed to have someone who wasn't going to give blanket approval of funds that did not help all of our kids. And so for me, when I sit down at night and I look back on my day, I want to know, did I do the right thing for the people of Oklahoma, or did I do the right thing for myself? And if I did the right thing for the people of Oklahoma, then I did my job. If I did the right thing just for myself, I didn't do my job, and I don't deserve the position that I have.
Do we have any follow-up on that before we move into lightning round? Anyone? Okay. All right. We're going to change this now just in respect of everyone's time and our film crew. You now have 1 minute on the remaining, I think we've got like 3 or 4 questions left. 1 minute. Okay, let's talk about support staff. Because there are so many issues that are important to people. Sometimes I think we really leave these guys out. And our support staff are the backbone of our schools that literally keep the wheels running. So, this next question addresses support personnel shortages. And this question was submitted by my friend, Patricia, who is a longtime community member from Noble, where I went to school, K through 12. She is a grandparent, and she's a bus driver, and she is such a treasure for our community. Craig, will you please ask her Patricia's question?
Sure, from Patricia from Noble. Everyone knows there's a teacher shortage, but there's also a support personnel shortage, especially finding qualified school bus drivers. What would you do as state superintendent to recruit and retain school bus drivers?
Absolutely. So there's 2 parts to the school bus driver issue that we need to address. One is internal, one is external. So let's talk with the internal first. We know that we have a lot of behavior issues when it comes to school bus riders, and so we need to address that. We also need to address how many kids are actually riding those buses, which I know goes into a budget thing of making sure we have enough buses and bus drivers. But we have a lot of kids right now that are being packed on buses and they're sitting in the aisles, and that's a safety issue, and that needs to be addressed. The second part on the external is that we've got to make sure that they are paid a living wage as well, because right now, we are asking bus drivers, and obviously they have a route in the morning and a route in the afternoon. They're paid by the hour, and if that is the only job, if that's the only job that they have, then they need to make sure that they are paid a living wage, because obviously they're having to supplement that income. Thank you.
I have a follow-up. Because there's more than bus drivers as support staff. Mm-hmm. Our paraprofessionals, our teacher aides, our child nutrition workers, our custodians, all of our support staff, maintenance, everybody. So I guess my question is, can you just share with us in 30 seconds, I know, all those things. Just what are your thoughts on how we're doing or what we could do better to support the people who support our schools through their role?
Okay, first of all, I have to say, when it comes to our support staff, we can't keep our building open without them, and we have got to make sure that we have the investments needed to make sure that, once again, they can make a living wage, because if you've ever been into a special education classroom and you've seen all of the amazing paras, or you've seen our wonderful custodian staff, our lunch ladies and lunch gentlemen that are working, they are making those connections and sharing those relationships with our kids and making sure that their basic needs are taken care of. And so if they're taking care of the basic needs of the most vulnerable children in our entire school, why aren't we taking care of their most basic needs as well? This just makes a good common sense again. And we're going to have to get loud about this, because yes, we do hear the word teacher. Let's talk about educators, and they are part of that as well, because some of the best lessons I ever learned were from my bus driver, and he taught me a lot of good lessons. So I think that we have to make sure that these people are also taken care of in our districts.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 really quick questions to wrap this. These are very general, okay? So these are not too specific to policy or anything. This is more about you. So in a minute or less, which I know is difficult, but we're running really tight on time. Joe, will you ask her question number 17 in a minute or less?
This question was submitted by Caitlin, a teacher and department head from Enid. Please outline your 3 top priorities to improve public education if elected.
Great, I've got just a little bit of time. We start with teacher flight because we don't have a shortage of educators. We have educators who are leaving. We have over 30,000 that have a certificate that will not come back to the classroom. The second thing is we have to address mental health because our kids are suffering at tremendous rates. And last but not least, we've got to make sure that we keep our public dollars in our public schools.
Okay, moving on to question 18, Tom. Again, a minute or less.
This question was submitted by Sandra, a teacher in Little Axe and parent from Shawnee. Tell us more about your leadership style and why you think you are the best fit to lead Oklahoma's public schools.
Well, thank you. So first of all, I would say is that I was inspired by my teacher. He had a philosophy that said, inspire them, teach them, and then get out of the way. And so, I think that that's important is to, yes, let's inspire everyone to do the best that they can, go above and beyond to make sure that, our reading scores are up, our math scores are up, that violence is down in our school, that communities are coming back together. Let's teach them how we're going to do that, our students, our communities, our families working together. And then let's let the magic of public schools happen. Let's let them be treated like the professionals that they are. And let me at the State Department of Education elevate and celebrate all of you to show them that we are not failing in the state of Oklahoma. We are changing and saving lives every single day.
Okay, and one final question from me. First of all, thank you again for prioritizing this conversation. We all in this room and voters across the state watching online really appreciate your willingness to prioritize talking with us today. It means a lot. So, it's like speed dating in a minute or less. Just give us some quick closing remarks and share with voters, actually specifically, let's share with the voters that are watching and that are here today what makes you unique compared to your opponent, and why should they vote for you on November the 8th?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. This has been a great honor, and I mean that sincerely. When you are a person that comes from a small town and you believe in the power of public education and how it saves lives, and then you get to stand before so many amazing people and get to advocate on the behalf of our children, our families, and our communities, it is an honor. I believe that public education is not Democrat or Republican. It is an issue that affects every single person. I believe that whoever walks through the doors of our public schools should be loved and cared for and educated. Whether they're coming to us with scars in their arms or scars in their hearts, we need to have a superintendent who knows it, who's boots on the ground with all of our educators, who can work with our superintendents, who can work with our legislators, who has worked at the national level and has stood toe-to-toe sometimes with some of the most powerful people in education and said, you need to pay attention to Oklahoma because Oklahoma is worth it. It is someone who believes that every single educator is saving and changing lives every single day, and that our families are important to our communities, and that we can work together. It's not us versus them versus them. It's about all of us working for all of them. And as I'm running, I tell people this all the time. I'm not running because of a party or an organization. I'm running for all of us. And if we don't take the time to vote, we are going to see things happen in public education like we've never seen before. We think we've seen it bad. And I am not a person who wants to push fear, but I am cautiously optimistic and I am a realist. And I know what I hear and I know what I see. I know that right now education is in trouble and we need someone who believes in education. And so that's what I'm doing here today, Erica. My name is Gina Nelson. I'm running for State Superintendent of Public Instruction for all of us.
Okay, so that wraps up our forum today with Ms. Nelson. Just want to, first of all, again, thank you to Stroud Public Schools for the use of this amazing facility. Thank you to all of our, yes, let's give them a hand. Thank you to all of our wonderful panelists. Your insight and institutional knowledge really enriched this conversation today, well beyond what I could have ever done myself up here. So thank you for coming and spending your day with us today to be part of this. And then for all of you who are here today in the audience, also thank you for coming and driving from across the state to be here to witness in person the discussions that we had today. So, for those of you who are watching this online, thank you for watching it online. And I just want to remind everybody, obviously, our big election is November the 8th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.